if we were cavemen, we would have been celebrated in our community as people that were like super hyperactive, going out, finding whatever we needed to do. Like we were really on it.
Yeah.
And so there was massive evolutionary benefits to having ADHD back in the day.
Hello and welcome back to the Challenges podcast. I'm your host Amber, and today I'm joined by Kat and Jack from the Distracted podcast. Guys, welcome on.
Hello.
Kat and Jack both discovered that they had ADHD in their mid-20s. And they started their podcast to reflect and learn from their experience. So, guys, welcome to Challenges. I have been so excited to get you guys on and pick your brains about ADHD because I got diagnosed when I was 21.
Okay.
And which I think is still, it's not too late in life to get diagnosed. But I find it really, really helpful to talk to people who also have ADHD because I haven't really, I don't think I've ever actually sat down with a friend and have gone into detail about my experience with it.
Okay.
It's lethargic, honestly.
It really is. Yeah, it's so good.
And I feel like when I first got diagnosed, I kind of didn't really want to talk about it that much because I think there's still a bit of a stigma about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have experienced that.
Definitely. I think it depends who you talk to. And I think sometimes, like, we're both quite lucky in the sense that we talk about this quite a lot on the podcast. A lot of our friends are in the same kind of, like, a lot of them have ADHD, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, really. And so, like, we're quite comfortable in our friendship group to be able to talk about it. But there's definitely some people who would kind of shrug it off or roll their eyes and be like, oh my God, everyone's got ADHD, or they don't understand it. And then you just feel like it's too hard to try and explain.
Yeah, I know. Could we go a bit back to the beginning and could you describe to us when you first realised that you might have ADHD and then also the next steps that you took to get diagnosed?
I got told I had ADHD like all the time when I was in school, but I batted it off because I didn't want to be like put in a box. I was kind of nervous about feeling like, maybe I would lean into the symptoms and I just didn't want to be categorized. The only thing I knew about ADHD was this one kid in our school and he was like quite really disruptive, throwing chairs and stuff. And I was like, I'm not that. So I was just nervous about being labeled like that. Not realizing at all that there was a spectrum and, different versions of it. And then I got into my first relationship when I was 24. And it was the first time really that I myself was reflected back, and you saw the good and the bad of yourself. Your family sort of put up with you and whatever, and they're used to you. And your mates are not really, I don't know, they just weren't really they weren't seeing any negative implications of my ADHD. If anything, they're probably just seeing the positive, like the hyperactivity, the impulsiveness and the fun, I guess. We were arguing all the time because I was just like getting distracted, not listening, just doing all the classic sort of negative ADHD stuff. And I was in the barbers and I was like, maybe it's that ADHD thing that everyone was telling me about. So I did this online survey and it was like, through the roof, you've tick.
Yeah.
And I actually found it really funny. All the questions were basically describing my personality. And I went home the next week and I did it with my mum and she just found it hilarious. She was like, do you lose things? And then I took a test. Like it took ages. I saved up and I did a private one, and it still took like 8 months to get to the test.
Yeah.
And they were like, you got full marks. You've smashed it.
Yeah.
So so then that's kind of when I realized like maybe I was 26, 27, something like that.
I think it's interesting what you say about like showing some of the symptoms because I feel like one of the big things that I've noticed, especially with my experience, is that ADHD isn't one size fits all.
No, not at all.
Because you can have, when I first got diagnosed, one of the main things that showed up in my test was that I have really, really intense hyperfocus, but I don't struggle with inattentiveness.
Okay.
And I saw this thing the other day, it was on the NHS and it said, I think 2 to 3 people out of 10 show symptoms of inattentiveness, but not impulsivity.
Yeah.
And hyperactivity. And I think it just shows like you have this idea of someone, because I was very similar. One of my friends had ADHD and she, her experience was completely different to mine. But I would just thought, I don't have ADHD because I look completely different to her and I act completely different to her.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to realise like the different symptoms that can come with ADHD and maybe some of the lesser known ones as well.
When I first met you, I didn't realise you weren't diagnosed. I thought you had ADHD, but I didn't know. I just thought it was like a lifelong diagnosis. Yeah. I just never considered that I would have it because what I saw in you and other people that I know is so different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
And so actually it was more the other way around. Right. Like I didn't think I had ADHD because I was like, you are quite like classic,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean,
Yeah,
in some ways.
The hyperactivity.
Yeah, it was like maybe a few months after that. It was definitely quite soon after
That's
meeting you and becoming friends with you.
The festival.
That then it started.
The festival.
Yeah.
When you were like
The
being scat
festival.
queen. She was just at the tent.
Yeah. Maybe you encouraged it out of me more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened. I don't know.
Which festival was this?
So we went to a festival. It was Secret Garden Party like a couple of years ago.
Love, yeah.
So fun. We had
Yeah,
the
yeah.
best time.
Yeah, it's good.
But I think I just completely let everything run wild. Like my tent was an absolute mess. I was just so free with everything. And I spend a lot of time trying to cover over things,
Mask
I
it,
would say,
yeah.
and mask a lot. And so that, I think there's something about just like being in a field with loads of people just dressing up and
Yeah.
stuff. You just feel like you don't have to. I think it just came out a lot then. And then it was really a few months after that suddenly it clicked for me. It was just watching a video that, this happens with a lot of people, right? But I just saw a video from someone I follow talking about how her ADHD affects her at work. And like everything just completely clicked for me from that point. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I had never even thought of that. It feels so weird to be even considering this. And then I just went down absolute rabbit hole, searching everything, researching, listening to so many books about it, like just learning everything I possibly could about it, doing all the tests, like getting such high marks in all the tests.
It's also it's really addictive when you've realised.
is.
It's
Yeah.
almost like you're like a journalist late at night in
Yeah,
New York, and you're like,
honestly.
I've
Yeah,
just discovered I've got this thing.
Connecting the web.
That night
Yeah.
I was up till like 4 a.m. in bed, just like looking at videos, listening to stuff, being like, yes, it all makes sense. It was
But that's
so
the thing,
crazy.
is it? I feel like it feels like such a weight off your shoulders. Like, I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys had this, but when
Yeah.
I remember the drive home from being diagnosed, I literally was like, this explains everything.
Yeah.
Like, I feel so much like, because there was so many behaviors that I had, and I'd be like, oh, you know, I'm just being lazy and I'm just procrastinating and stuff. And then when I actually had that diagnosis, not that you should use it as a label for your behavior, but at the same time, it does explain a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also like so important to have that compassion with yourself. And it's really hard to do that when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it really helps if you can be like, okay, hold on, I'm really struggling with this, but I know that there is a reason for it. And like, let's do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Figure out the things that I need to put in place, but have the compassion because it really, really helps.
Sure. When you remove the guilt, which
Yeah.
is a big thing that we've sort of talked about a lot on the podcast, and what people have come in have said to us is once you remove that shame about yourself, that I'm just like, oh, why am I always forgetting stuff? Like, why? Like, I need to be better. I need to be better. And then you replace that with, oh, okay, I just will forget stuff.
Yeah.
That's sort of like in my, so how am I going to now prevent myself from like
Yeah.
stopping to do that? Like what things am I going to put in place? And you can be way more productive and proactive about your issues.
Yeah.
Instead of just shaming yourself
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
time. And one thing I love about having ADHD is actually kind of a lot of your faults are actually really quite clearly documented
Yeah.
online. You can list it off.
Yeah.
So there's loads of research and loads of community talking about all the same faults. So it's quite nice to sort of,
Yeah.
and lethargic to sort of talk about these issues that you felt like were very
Yeah.
personal to you. And,
Yeah.
and actually it's shared amongst loads of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you guys a bit, because I think there's a real lack of research when it comes to ADHD and adulthood. When you were saying that the video that you saw about, was it a woman who was describing
Yeah.
about how ADHD affects her in the workplace? What were some of those symptoms you would say are quite specific to adulthood and ADHD? So when you're in the workplace and when you're maybe dealing with your first like relationship, things that happen later in life, how are some of the ways that those symptoms manifest for you?
Firstly, I think there's a lot of things that make it more difficult because you've spent however many years, 20, 30 years not understanding it. You've put so many like coping mechanisms in place and you already have like a lot of shame around those. So that is something that shows up massively. I mean, for me personally, it's like procrastination, like chronic procrastination, like not being able to follow through with things, low self-esteem, forgetfulness, and also kind of like, I think feeling frustrated that you are technically a grown-up but still feel very much like a child. And it's really difficult because you're like, I'm really trying to function as an adult, but there's so many things that I can't seem to grasp, and you do just get so frustrated with yourself for that. Like basic things like just feeding yourself regular meals.
Yeah.
My mind's going to you when you're sort of like so overwhelmed by everything, you lie on the kitchen floor.
Like sometimes I do just melt onto the floor because I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't make a decision. There's too much to do. I'm lost, and now I just can't move.
Is there a word for that? Decision paralysis or something like that? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do
exactly
you guys
that.
find that you struggle with that a lot when it comes to ADHD?
I
'Cause
do hugely. Do you?
Yeah, sometimes the more I'm talking about ADHD, the more I'm actually realizing I'm doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even realize that was a thing, and now we started talking about it. I'm noticing it. Like, oh yeah, this is the decision paralysis thing. It's usually when I have lots of options, kind of in the start of the day sometimes, when
where do
because
you
we're
start?
both freelance,
Yeah.
so I can kind of pick and choose what I do when I do in a way,
Yeah.
and then it can be a nightmare.
It's
'cause
a
I'm
blessing and a curse.
waking
I would
up like,
say.
God, there's 4 things to do. I don't know. I'll just clean my shoes.
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's
I
it.
do
That's
that.
the
I
easy
do
thing.
a task that I feel like I'd find more dopamine in. So I'll push
Exactly.
off the other tasks. I'll be like, oh, I'll do this because I can kind of enjoy doing that.
Yeah. Well, you've got to do the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
You've got to do the least enjoyable thing first and delay your gratification.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just don't do the stuff you don't want to do.
I saw this
Yeah.
really interesting thing the other day, which was about people with ADHD. They should just eat that frog. So it's like, if you have to eat a frog, would you rather push it off and push it off and push it off and know that you have to do this awful thing, or just eat the frog straight away and then
Get it done.
get it
Yeah,
done?
definitely. And the thing is, like, most of the time, once you've done it, it's over so quickly. You've been building it up for days, weeks, months.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this huge thing looming over you every single day you wake up. And then you do it and you're like, it's actually okay.
Like hoovering. Every time I
my
hoover,
God,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, it's done.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Straight
about that
away.
for months.
I know.
Just did it. Did it in about 5 minutes. It was fine.
Or like taking the bins out. Like it's
Oh
such
my
a
God,
small
yeah.
task, but for me that is like such a big wall. I'm like, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
I cannot do that.
Yeah, it's really odd, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
when you think about it, just like generally, it's like such a simple task. And if you were to ask someone else to do it, you wouldn't think anything of
Yeah.
it. But doing it yourself, it's like, there's no way. There's
It's
no way.
interesting, like, because you guys are freelance. When you were at school, do you look back now and think, I had that kind of structure that you kind of had other people monitoring you and supervising you and making sure that you would go to your classes and stuff? Because when I got to uni, I found that I really struggled with not having a strict routine and not having someone that can look at you. Do you ever look back at that now and think, okay, there was clearly some signs there, but I just didn't really think about it?
I think like looking back over school has been really eye-opening for me because there's so many ways it showed up that I didn't realise at the time and other people didn't realise. But definitely going freelance was actually the catalyst for me discovering I have ADHD. And also lockdown. That's when I think lockdown was the first time I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't do anything. And it's just that sense of like, you have the possibility, the whole day is just open.
Yeah.
It's so much pressure.
Yeah, it's
And
almost
then
scary, isn't it?
It is scary because then it's like there's so many things I could do, especially in lockdown. It's like, do I want to become like,
Yeah.
you know,
An
an Olympic
entrepreneur.
athlete?
Oh my
Or
God, yeah,
what am
I
I going
had
to do?
that.
Start a million
Start your
businesses?
yoga career
There's
again.
so many options. It's terrifying. Then you beat yourself up for not doing any of them. Anyway, so yeah, I think going freelance was a huge one for me because losing that, I have to be somewhere at a certain time. I have a certain number of hours I work. I sit at this place with these people, all this stuff. It's just gone.
Yeah.
And it's nuts.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever spoken about this, but having ADHD in boys compared to girls.
Yeah.
Because one of my best mates, he has ADHD and he was saying that in lockdown, he got diagnosed at the same time as very similar time to me. I was diagnosed a year after him. But he was saying that when he realized I was in the process of getting diagnosed, he was like, oh, just be really careful because there's loads of different research when it comes to boys and girls with ADHD, and it's much more easy for ADHD to be caught in boys rather than girls.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, guys externalize their ADHD, so hyperactive and they're all over the shop, whereas girls internalize it. So
Okay.
it comes through like anxiety and
Yeah.
lots of thoughts in the head. To be honest, it sounds way worse internalizing than externalizing.
Oh yeah, it's hell.
Because I can just get it out.
Yeah.
But having it in
Yeah.
is long. That
Yeah.
sounds quite stressful.
So it's such an internal battle as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of learned that fairly early on. Maybe you knew that already when we started
Yeah.
the podcast about the internal, external.
Definitely.
And it really sort of, it means you can't just point out at people and go, oh, they're ADHD, they're not. You know, you really can't see it a lot of the
No.
time, especially in women. And
Yeah.
often I wonder, like, is it because of like, is it an actual biological reason why women internalize, or is it a cultural thing
Yeah,
of not
yeah.
being seen as this loud,
Yeah.
really sort of,
Yeah.
we're going to do this and this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
be a
think a
mix.
big part to play it must be cultural as well. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it, like women are always, you should be quiet,
Yeah.
you should, which obviously is not the case. But if we, didn't have a gender kind of stereotype, then women could be like, oh no, it's fine. Like I can
Yeah.
be more hyperactive and I can be more impulsive like publicly. But I feel like if I was to do that, I'd feel a lot more shame.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't really explain why, but that definitely is a thing. And I feel like maybe it's a bit of a mix of the two, but I would say definitely is a cultural thing.
And maybe almost, I mean, I felt like I was always sort of kind of rewarded for my hyperactivity in a
Right.
way. Like at school, I would get in trouble, but it would be like sort of said, people would laugh. There was dopamine attached to being hyperactive, whereas maybe it wouldn't be the same. And you were saying like how you would mask at school.
Yeah, but also I would get told off for talking and being like messing around in classes and stuff. So immediately that's shut down. Like if you don't understand, like if I didn't understand anything or I was bored in the lesson, I would be talking to the person next to me and laughing and stuff. Then I get told off, sent out the classroom, all that stuff. And so it's like, that's not okay. And I totally get that's disrupting the class. So it's technically not okay. But I suppose from early on, you're taught like, you can't just let that stuff out,
And do you think there should be a change in the way that the education system deals with ADHD at the moment? And what are some things that maybe teachers in the classroom or uni lecturers could do to help like manage people's ADHD? Yeah.
If it's similar to how it was when I was in school, then they should just be sort of a lesson. Maybe it's in like the tutor time thing before the classes start, where you just talk about what it is.
Yeah.
And you could play a few videos, you could get someone in who's ADHD. But basically the main thing is to highlight the spectrum.
Yeah.
Not just to show if you've got ADHD or this sort of really loud, completely disruptive, self-destructive person.
Yeah.
There's a real spectrum. And if you're daydreaming or if you're not focusing, then it's okay, actually.
Yeah.
It's okay to be like that.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to feel shame about it.
Yeah, and your brain is just wired differently, and that's
Exactly.
it's not a bad thing.
And it's great. It's actually a good thing, in
There
my
are so
opinion.
many
If you
superpowers
can
that come with ADHD.
Totally.
But I think also with the schools, I think it's important for teachers to be educated about it as well, so that they can pick up on it. It's not necessarily their responsibility to be the one who refers them for diagnosis and stuff, but I think they should be aware of the warning signs. Like if someone is always daydreaming, always kicking up in class and stuff, like you can't just tell them off because there's obviously a reason they're doing it. If they can't interact with the lesson, there needs to be another way that they can learn. And obviously that's a huge thing, but I think that's kind of the direction it probably needs to go in.
Particularly in women as well, as in like if teachers need to be educated on how women show signs of ADHD.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I feel like I never got picked up by my teachers because I was disruptive and I talked a bit, but I never really ruined the class.
Yeah.
And
Same.
so it was manageable.
Yeah.
So it was never like, we need to. Whereas, if you're a woman and you're not massively disrupting the class, but, you're kind of internalizing a lot, you'll be like, it's manageable. We don't need to deal with this.
Exactly.
And another thing I wanted to ask you guys is one of the main symptoms that I experience with my ADHD, which I feel like is slightly not really spoken about as much, is rejection sensitive dysphoria.
Yeah.
I always thought, it's just everyone hates feelings of being rejected and things like that. 99% of people with ADHD experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, which I would have just never thought was an actual symptom that you could feel as part of ADHD.
I know. It's like, because it's one of the, like, it's not on the diagnosis kind of thing, but it just seems to be that everyone seems to relate to that. Like, we put out a clip about it and it went absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Like, everyone is just like, yes. The intense, because it's like physical pain.
Yeah.
Like,
literally.
it's so hard to explain because obviously no one likes criticism.
No.
But it just is like the intensity of it. Is
Really
just,
intense. It absorbs your whole body.
And
then you start spiraling. Does everyone think
Exactly.
this?
Yeah.
Has everyone always thought
You
this?
go back over all your history, your life, everything, like whenever you've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's
It happened to me last night. Someone
it?
said something, and it was just they were just being really honest. And
Yeah.
you said this thing a while ago, and it made me feel like. And I was like, oh my god! I literally said to her, I was like, does everyone think this? How long for?
Yeah.
My chest was really tight.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Get
almost
lightheaded.
walk.
Yeah,
I was like, just like,
literally.
oh. She
Yeah.
was like, sit down. She was great. Sit down. We'll have a tea.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
sort of just one comment, but
Yeah.
it can really fling you about.
It just
really
completely
can.
takes over your whole mind.
Yeah.
And I, especially like when I'm socializing, because I wanted to ask you guys about ADHD and rejection sensitive dysphoria in relation to socializing and maybe drinking as well, because I'll get home from a social interaction, and if I feel in the slightest bit rejected, my whole night or my whole day, the rest of the next day, is basically just consumed by analysing my last conversation with someone. And I feel like in a weird way, my whole perception of my relationships with people is based on our last interaction, which apparently is a thing to do with ADHD as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
But that I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's ruined. I've ruined it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
are your relationships really that fickle? Like, that you
that's
could
the
just
thing.
one comment that they probably don't even remember.
Yeah.
But
That's a really good point,
I
actually.
do the same thing. Even if during the whole time it's felt like it was really good, and then I'll leave and I'll just get a little flashback to something and be like, oh no, maybe that was bad.
Yeah.
Maybe they're annoyed with me. I want to message them like, are we okay? But I obviously don't want to do that.
I'm always that type of person where I'm like, it was really great to see you. Like, hope that you still like me as a friend. Yeah. Because I feel like it really does have that effect on you because you're so worried about rejection.
Yeah.
That preventing it it becomes the priority in your mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Chronic people pleasers.
Yeah, chronic.
But yeah, it's totally overwhelming a lot of the time.
Yeah. I wanted to just go back a bit to being diagnosed later in life with ADHD, and in terms of maybe romantic relationships. Do you think that there are some symptoms of ADHD that become quite hard to deal with when you're in a relationship with another person?
I was in a relationship for like 4 years,
Yeah.
and that was the relationship where I realised I had ADHD.
Yeah.
And actually, in hindsight, it turns out she also has ADHD.
Okay.
And we both kind of discovered it off the back of each other. I mean, yeah, it was pretty rocky because there was a lot of inattentiveness and then she would be really upset, understandably. You know, she's having a conversation with me and then I'm just like, look at that over there. There's whatever. And then I would feel loads of shame about it. Yeah. But when we kind of realized that it was this ADHD thing, we did a bunch of research. It became a lot better.
Okay.
Because you have an understanding. And then you kind of eradicate the shame a bit. And it's still not easy. I mean, like the main problem I had was like dates.
Yeah.
Like remembering to go to meet up here or do this. And so now I've just really, I'm like the biggest loser with my calendar. Like I'll be with a friend and they'll be like, should we do that? I'm like, yep, let me get on the calendar immediately. The time, the date, everything has to be there. Really clearly labeled.
Yeah.
Like, because the amount of times I put in the calendar, like, mate. That's it. It's like, what, mate? Who? I'll delete that. Probably fake. So, yeah, I think I've learned to be unbelievably strict. But I think the main thing, and I'm kind of in a new relationship now, is having, first of all, sort of saying to the other person, these are my flaws, by the way. Not sort of masking it and being like, oh, I'm this perfect person. Like, really laying it out thick. Like, I'm pretty bad at remembering stuff. I am going to lose stuff a lot. Like, I just will.
Yeah.
And when you sort of give these disclaimers, it does smooth the ride a little bit.
Yeah.
There's better expectations. And also, it on the other person, they kind of just need to have a bit of patience, I think.
Yeah.
And understanding
Yeah.
sometimes.
Definitely.
You think?
Which leads on nicely to my husband, who is the most patient man in the world.
Really?
Yeah, God, I wish I could marry him.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
I'm so lucky. He also has ADHD.
Okay.
It's just amazing to have someone who understands it so much and can understand where I struggle. There's definitely certain things that I do that would frustrate the life out of some people. And so I think there's got to be that balance of, like you say, them understanding and being patient with it. But it helps that he also has ADHD, so he has his own stuff.
He understands it, yeah.
It's a bit mad that he's that patient and he's got ADHD.
I know. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Just goes to show like the spectrum of it again. Like,
Yeah,
everything goes back to-
exactly.
Yeah, I think because my previous relationships, I've never spoke about ADHD because I just didn't want to create this
Stigma
I don't know,
on yourself.
And now that I've realised, actually, if I was just better at communicating about it, then my relationships would just go so much smoother.
Totally. Honestly, it was the best thing I did in this new relationship was just be like really upfront straight away. Just telling her loads. Like, this is these are the things. And also at the start, like, you got nothing to lose.
No.
Like, you might as well show the bad and the good because then it kind of cuts through the crap a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want to be like
100%.
trying to cover over all of that stuff.
And then
It's
it
gonna
comes
be a
out
long
later
term.
and it's a bit like suddenly it's like, oh, this person is quite different to how I remember. And
Yeah.
also, you know what it's like when something's new and exciting, you give loads of attention. You're hyper focused all the time. And you really want to be. You're like this kind of perfect version of yourself. And you're really focused and like energetic. And eventually it kind of does obviously naturally wane a little bit. And the other stuff comes in. So it's better to let them know about the bad stuff.
Yeah.
as
But I
soon
think
as
it's
possible.
also important there's a fine line between just like writing that stuff off as like, I'm always going to be rubbish at that, so you deal with it.
Yeah.
Or being like really conscious of it. I'm sorry if this happens, but can we, find workarounds, or I'm working on it, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that you're not just kind of relying on that and just being like, sorry, you have to deal with it.
So I've got like a good example. So like something small, but it can make a big difference if you're not talking about it. And like sometimes if I'm really busy, like maybe even for the weekend, I just forget to text completely.
Yeah.
Like it could be like 2 days, 3 days, and just I'm completely off my phone.
Yeah.
I'm really just not there. I had a conversation about it with the person I'm with, and she was just like, yeah, it's a bit, sometimes I'm like, come on, you've just dropped off the face of the earth. And that could have been a bigger thing of like, I'm like, I felt really shameful about it. I need to start texting more. When actually I was like, okay, I'm not very good at it. I'll try my best, but when I remember, I will just send a message going, hey, I'm really sorry about these last few days, blah, blah, blah. I was like that. And that means so much more than just being like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
And not acknowledging it.
Yeah.
And so sort of understanding it has really helped.
And I feel like that can go back to like task paralysis as well. Like sometimes when I know I have to send a text to someone, I kind of big it up so much in my head that I just can't actually get round to sending the text.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then my friends will be like, oh, where have you gone? Like, because I'm either hyper focusing and I respond to text straight away, or I'm literally not there for 3 days.
Exactly the same.
And they're like,
What do you like on group chats?
well, it really, really depends. Like sometimes I'm really, really on it, and I'm like kind of the most vocal person on the group chat, and I'm always sending gifs and memes and stuff. But then other times I'm literally like, I have to like mute the group chat because it's just too much for me.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the same as me. I think sometimes it depends. You have to catch it at the perfect point. If you're like a couple of messages out, that it's like, oh God, I can't even try and get in now, and I'm just going to stay away from it. And then friends are like, yeah, okay, where have you been?
What happened? Like, where have you gone? I wanted to ask you guys about because I love talking about people having a toolbox for things.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know what's in your toolbox in terms of managing symptoms of ADHD in your daily life.
I can go. You can.
If you want.
Yeah, I'm happy to go.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about my red phone case.
Yeah, I knew you were. I thought I'd leave you to talk about the red phone case.
What's the red phone case?
Well, it's taken many years of trying to find the right case.
Got you, yeah.
And I've found a technique that I'll go to the grave, the red grave with this. And it's anything valuable put in bright red.
Okay.
Phone. Let me just get it out.
I'm still caseless, so maybe I need to do this.
Oh, wow.
I know.
So this is my phone case. Big and red.
Yeah.
It's got a big zipper. Zipper's important. Got to have a zipper. And it has all my keys in, my house keys, my bike key, everything. And it's obviously got my cards in. Now, people, you lose. It's an all or nothing sort of strategy here. However, it does mean that you can ring all of your valuables if you lose it.
Yeah,
all of them. But the main thing about the red is that when you're in a rush, shit, where's my phone case? Where's my passport? Where's my headphones? Bright red, you just see it. You see it in the midst of your chaos.
Yeah.
There it is. And it just quickens everything up so much. You drop it on the floor. It's on the floor. Boom.
It's bright red.
It's bright
You're
red.
not going to miss it.
It's changed the game for me. I haven't lost. Have I lost this phone since I've...
I was with you and you lost it a few weeks
Oh,
ago.
yeah. I did lose it. I was,
But found
it
it
was
that
at
one
a
time.
festival.
because you could ring it.
But yeah, rang it.
Yeah.
And it was fine. Yeah.
That is genius. That is actually genius. I need to stop doing that.
It's
Yeah.
a good tech. And
yeah.
maybe if you don't want your phone to be bright red, just think of some other valuables that you have that you hold dear to your heart and slap it in red.
Passport.
Yeah.
New passport.
Yeah, I've got a
cover.
little
Passport's
Helix
good.
pencil case that I put
Yeah.
red,
Okay.
that I put my passport in.
I
And
do
that
think
helps.
I'm personally not in the big phone case.
The big
area.
red era.
I don't love that, but I love it for you, but not for me. But I do think grouping all of your important stuff together is really good because every time I leave the house, I'm running around in all different directions and corners to try and find everything every time. I'm just like running upstairs like going through my drawers. I'm like, how have I already lost just like basic stuff I take out every day? And so I think grouping it together, maybe having like a little box that you just keep all of that stuff in that you're going to need daily. Just saves you. I don't do that, but I need to start doing that.
You know when you find one thing and then you've got to find the next, and you find the next thing, and then the
put it
first
down,
thing's
it's gone.
gone.
Oh my god, yeah.
No. It's like
Literally like a
Looney
scavenger
Tunes.
hunt.
Yeah.
Every single morning before work, it's like, oh my god, I've got to do this. Oh my god, where's that? Oh, I've just lost that
Exactly.
again.
Yeah. This is why this is great, man. Just one
Yeah,
thing.
no, it's good. Just pick it up.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
go.
yeah.
And then also like, Definitely lists are great.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I think you've got to have, again, it's got to be a balance, because as soon as I start writing a list, it becomes a like 5-sheet spread of everything I could possibly want to do. So it's kind of like...
I'm going to become an astronaut.
Yeah, I'm like, must do that tomorrow. And
Research
then,
becoming an astronaut.
Yeah,
That's what I do.
Exactly.
I literally write down on my list, like, if I want to do something, I'll be like, research into that, possibly that becoming a career path for me. It's like, when are you going to do that? Like, that's not your priority on that day.
I know, exactly.
But
I think having the two lists of like, one is your to-do list and one is just brain dump list. So anytime you're working through something, you're like, oh, I want to become an astronaut. Just be like, maybe become an astronaut, and just put it down. And then it's out of your head, and you don't have to immediately open a new tab and Google astronaut. Like, you can just put it there and lay it to rest for a bit.
Yeah.
But lists are good.
And alarms as well. It's obvious, but it really does help. Like alarms for everything.
Yeah.
So like if there's something that I really need to remember tomorrow and I feel like I'm not going to remember, then I will set an alarm like 5 minutes to do it.
Okay.
Or if I put the washing in, I have to set an alarm.
Same.
If I don't set an alarm on my phone for the washing, I will not get the washing out.
Really?
It will stay there for days. For days potentially.
Yeah, I've done that.
Genuinely.
We're talking potentially
I'm
days.
talking potential days.
Yeah. 100%. Same with me.
Yeah. So alarms are your friend for sure. The phone's great, isn't it? What would we do?
The phone is
without
great.
it?
I'm
God.
going to have to
Imagine
take that on
having
board
ADHD
because that's going
before.
to really help me. Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Imagine being like the 80s, the 70s,
Yeah.
and having ADHD. Life
I
would be
don't know the
like leaving
phone.
your house and not having Google Maps to know where you're going.
Yeah.
Like what?
Because was it really a thing back in those days? Because I feel like nowadays, maybe there's a slightly negative kind of conversation that has come up about ADHD being like a new bandwagon, especially over the last few years. I've really seen that.
Yeah.
But have you ever spoken about to your parents about like ADHD? And
My dad's
whether
got
they
it.
has
He's
Really?
absolutely riddled with it. Yeah.
And
he loves
has he
it.
been diagnosed? Because my mum always
No.
says, "Oh, I definitely have it, but I'm not going to get diagnosed."
Yeah.
My dad, for the first time this year, admitted that he thinks he's got it.
Really?
Yeah. He's very of that era of like, it's sort of what I was saying, like how I felt when I was younger. Like, I don't want to be put in a box.
Yeah.
I'm a fully grown man. I don't need to have that label. But oh my God, it's actually funny how much he's got it. Yeah. I'll like literally be talking to him and he'll just be like, so when are we gonna have dinner then, son? I'm talking about my car.
Talking about some deep stuff. Right now. You're just ignoring me.
Yeah, I mean, it runs in my family. My brother was diagnosed as a child.
Okay.
So it's kind of like my family were all aware of it. But I just, obviously because it just displays so differently, it just was never a thing for me. There's things that don't help. Like you say, phones are a godsend in some ways, but sometimes they destroy me. Like I can be on it for hours and completely lose myself in it. And that's really, really bad. So because they're obviously addictive to everyone, but if you have ADHD, it's like a whole other level that you can latch onto.
The dopamine chasing and the doom scrolling is a real thing for me, I think, as well.
Yeah, hugely.
We were told by a guy called Joshua Harwood. He diagnoses people with ADHD. He's amazing. He came on our pod. And he said that if we were cavemen, we would have been celebrated in our community as people that were like super hyperactive, going out, finding whatever we needed to do. Like we were really on it.
Yeah.
And so there was massive evolutionary benefits to having ADHD back in the day.
Yeah.
So see it see it as a superpower.
Yeah, I 100% see mine as in terms of one of the things I love is hyperfocus.
Yeah.
For me, that can either be a really, really good thing in terms of sometimes at school, I would become so obsessed with my work that I would, focus on it for like 5 hours.
Yeah.
However, in terms of, as I said, analyzing social interactions and overthinking, it can be a real negative thing as well.
Yeah,
It's just finding the
definitely.
balance as well and catching yourself as well. I feel like one thing for me is with my symptoms, I'll have to catch myself really quickly.
Yeah, same. If you're going to be really stuck in something, like you have to almost just count yourself out of it and just be like, no, I'm not doing this. Or if you are trying to build up to doing a task, you can just kind of be like, right, after 3, I'm going to get up and do it because otherwise you are stuck.
Yeah.
Like so stuck.
Yeah. On challenges, we always like discussing how you've turned your challenges into positive action. Could you guys tell us a bit about what was the reason that you decided to get together and start the podcast and what that first conversation was where you were like, oh, we should maybe potentially explore this, starting a podcast? Where did that come from?
I wanted to do a podcast for ages. I make podcasts. That's my job. I'm a podcaster. And so I've always wanted to do something. And when I got diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, maybe that's the thing that I do it about.
Yeah.
And so I messaged Kat and I was like, Kat, do you want to produce my podcast? And she said, no, I want to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah.
And then so we met up in a cafe and we planned it and we've stuck to none of those plans. but it was pretty much that, wasn't it?
evolving.
And then
Yeah.
we just had like a bit of structure, and we were like, let's go for it. We're both really excited by it, and honestly, it was the best thing ever. Deciding to co-present it. If I had just been strong-headed and been like, no, I want to do it on my own, I would have done 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And it would have ended.
It's also like weird because basically I'd been thinking about it for ages, but because it's just so not anything I do. It was like really scary to even approach it. So then when Jack asked me about doing one, I was just like, I'm gonna have to think about it, producing it, because in my head I really desperately wanted to do it, and I'd imagined doing one with Jack.
Yeah.
But just didn't say anything about it because I was scared.
Oh, really?
So like, yeah.
Oh, you never
for
told
like
me that.
ages, for like months, I've been
Oh.
thinking I just really want to help people, and I hate that people don't understand themselves or like know all this stuff, and all I want to do is share, our stories, other people's stories, get that information out there. So then when you said you wanted to do it, I was like, this is amazing, but I want to do it with you.
Yeah.
And then like you said, I'm so glad that we managed to do it together.
It's great. It's so much better.
Yeah.
Because we have like accountability. And honestly, we were doing it for like 8 months and basically getting no listeners. Pretty much. Well, 6 months. We were getting them.
from
We're building
nothing.
it, but we started from nothing.
Yeah.
And I think if I was just doing that on my own, or maybe vice versa, I'd have just lost interest.
Yeah.
But we just kept going because it was fun. We had some accountability because we were doing it together. And in the last few months, it's really just doing amazing.
Yeah,
It's
it's doing
I'm so
incredible.
proud of how it's just sort of launched into there's real audience now and listeners and
Yeah.
followership, and it's great.
Definitely. And we've both like learned so much about ourselves along the whole journey.
Yeah,
so
I can
far as
imagine.
well.
It's a real like journey of self-discovery in a way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Which it was partly why we both wanted to do it, right?
Yeah.
Like learning just more about ADHD as a thing, but also helping other people understand it and feel more like
It is really like
Understood.
therapy. It's great. It's like free therapy.
Yeah.
And if I compare how much I knew Kat this time last year, God, it's massively different.
Yeah.
I know you so much better now.
Yeah.
And what's your final pieces of advice for people with ADHD or who are potentially deciding to get diagnosed? What would your advice be for them?
Back to the compassion, like have compassion with yourself while you're learning about it. Definitely try your best to learn what you can, like from, valid resources. There's so many like audiobooks you can listen to or read if you like reading. And then if you feel like you want to pursue a diagnosis, definitely do that. But be aware that it is a long process.
Yeah.
Like it's up to like 8 years in some places, which is why I think it's so important to start learning about it. If you really do think, if there's anything you're struggling with, don't be put off by like, oh, I can't, diagnose myself. You can definitely start to just learn about yourself, learn about your struggles, whatever that is, even if you don't put an ADHD label on it. Make sure you're learning about it, because if you're struggling with something, that is valid.
Yeah.
You just have to, like, it's so important that you seek out therapy if you need to, try and understand yourself and have that compassion for yourself. Take it as an experiment, try stuff out. Some things might work for you, some things might not. But just try and be kind to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had thought of that like when I was first getting diagnosed, because I feel like I was just so harsh on myself. And I look back now and I'm like, things just would have been so much easier and you would have got more things done if you had just shown a bit more compassion.
Yeah, definitely.
I reiterate that. I think that's the most important thing. It's the guilt and the shame.
Yeah.
Once you eradicate that, then you'll never fully get rid of it, by the way. But once you start,
No, but you don't need to.
But no, exactly.
work with
Yeah,
it,
you can
right?
work with it, exactly. And then you'll it will just make you, I think it will quicken the process of being able to get better at those things that you could get better at.
Yeah, definitely.
And have you guys got anything exciting coming up, and where can our listeners find you?
We've got an Instagram page.
We've
which
got an
is-
Instagram page called, it's distracted.podcast, Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. And we release every week. Pretty much Mondays, every Monday. It's been a couple of slack weeks. My fault. Went on holiday, forgot to do the edits. I messaged Kat like a few hours before getting on the flight. Sorry about this. Can you do the edits the next 3 weeks? Yeah. God. So we're just releasing every week.
Awesome.
On Mondays. You'll find it anywhere.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks
This
for
has been
having
so
us.
insightful, and it's just so nice to just actually have like a proper chat about it, about
Yeah.
ADHD. And if you found this podcast helpful, you can like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.